Hello everyone and good evening. I'm Don Arleth and welcome to World News Tonight, coming to you live from Warsaw here on TVP World. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz traveled to Washington on Thursday for his first sit-down with U.S. President Donald Trump. Will this meeting help mend the transatlantic tensions? We'll have more on that in just a moment, but first, the latest headlines. NATO defense ministers vow huge leap forward in defense capabilities. Moldova's prime minister warns of a Russian takeover operation. She did her best, but came up short. Poland's Iga Świątek loses the semifinals of the French Open. When Germany's new Chancellor Friedrich Merz walked into the Oval Office, he brought more than a gold-framed birth certificate of Donald Trump's German grandfather. He brought the weight of Europe's economy, NATO's future, and Ukraine's survival. With tariffs looming, far-right tensions rising, and U.S. support for Ukraine hanging in the balance, Merz's mission was clear: to keep the West united. Our chief political correspondent, Aryna, reports.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz on a mission to Washington.
President Trump, sir, your message to the people of Germany.
Arriving for his first face-to-face meeting with US President Donald Trump and aiming to put Europe's largest economy back on the world stage.
We are having so much in common, our history. We owe the Americans a lot. We will never forget about that. And so with your German provenance, I think this is a very good basis for close cooperation between America and Germany.
As he touched down across the Atlantic, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, tariffs and defense spending were all on the agenda.
Germany stands at a crossroads. There is war on the European continent, and Germany's leader now has to prove that he's living up to the expectation to be one of Europe's main leaders in fighting off the Russian aggression, in reviving the German economy, and strengthening Germany's own defense.
But also front of Merz's mind, Trump's previous diplomatic takedowns in the Oval Office, not least with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
During the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
And ahead of the trip, speculation ran rampant over whether the pair, who have spoken several times by phone, would hit it off, especially when Trump officials moved their public meeting to the start of the visit instead of holding it after a private lunch where they could get to know each other first. On the flip side, German media reported that the two exchanged text messages and are even on first-name basis.
Friedrich Merz is an ardent transatlanticist, has been in the private business, and that is a topic that they, both Trump and Merz, can connect on. But he has been, unlike Keir Starmer and President Macron, has been critically rebuking some of Trump's statements since he took over the office of the German Chancellery. So he will not try flattery alone.
In the end, the tone of the long-awaited sit-down was calm and cordial, with the stakes high for Chancellor Merz, who's trying to reposition his country as a leader in European security. That includes beefing up Germany's military and falling in line with Trump's demands for NATO members to increase defense cash. It also means facing up to Trump's 50% tariff threats on the EU, especially as Germany is the bloc's largest exporter, and convincing him to keep supporting Ukraine in the fight against Russia.
The German government's objectives are clear, and the Chancellor will do everything in his power to press the U.S. president for a fair ceasefire, including under threat of sanctions.
For Merz, there was recent history to reckon with too. Trump called Germans bad, very bad during his first term, and Vice President J.D. Vance has taken a particular liking to the far-right AfD, which is now Germany's second-largest political power. When it was announced that the party would be labelled an extremist entity, Vance attacked the move on social media, saying the establishment is rebuilding the Berlin Wall. That prompted Merz to hit back, telling the US to stay out of German politics. Fast forward to Thursday's audience at the White House, and Merz played the dance of a diplomat.
Because you speak such good English, is it as good as your German, would you say? Do you feel more comfortable?
Aaron Dahmen, TVP World.
To understand almost everything and to speak as good as I can.
Very good. You know, it's an achievement, actually. Thank you.
Allied defense ministers met at NATO headquarters in Brussels today and have started to work on a plan to ramp up defense spending to 5% of GDP following pressure from the United States. Alex Cardier was there and has the story.
Well, this meeting of NATO defence ministers focused on one thing: defence spending increasing under pressure from the United States to ramp up that defence spending to an overall target of 5%. Now, that will be divided in 3.5% on core defence spending, the kind of spending that is already part of the NATO targets, and 1.5% on security and defence investments. That means getting the countries, the logistics, the infrastructure ready for a potential conflict situation. That is what was broken down by the Secretary General, Mark Rutte, in the last few moments. A lot of pressure from Pete Hegseth, the Defence Secretary of the United States, saying that that target has to be agreed. A commitment to reach that 5% of GDP spending target has to be agreed by allies when they meet at the leaders' level in The Hague at the end of this month. But of course, spending more on defence for so many countries, if not for all countries, will have to mean spending less on other things, spending less on hospitals, on schools, on things that people feel they need. Mark Rutte was asked exactly that question. Let's have a listen to his answer.
We have rich societies. We can do this. But if we don't act now, the next 3 years we are fine. But we have to start now, because otherwise from 3, 4, 5 years from now, we are really under threat.
So clearly those priorities will have to be set, those sacrifices will have to be made, and those decisions, of course, will go down to those national governments. But there is a desire, of course, or rather I should say a fear, that if this defence spending does not go up, the US may step away, and that was the concern. That is why these European powers are now having to step up and spend more. I asked the Secretary of State at the Ministry of Defence, the Polish Ministry of Defence, about that very fear, about that US commitment to NATO. Are they going to stick around? Here was his answer.
Americans declare their commitment to NATO, and that is unwavering. On our side, lays to increase our responsibility for conventional defense in Europe. And that is absolutely legitimated, because Europe can and should afford it. So in close cooperation with Americans, we'll do it.
Some reassurance, therefore, from the Polish minister here at NATO headquarters. That American commitment to NATO is still here in his eyes, but Europeans have to step up. So now the ministers have met, have started to hash out these plans, which of course will be finalized at that meeting of NATO leaders at The Hague at the end of this month. Under a lot of pressure from the United States, the Europeans will have to spend more. I'm Alex Cardier at NATO headquarters for TVP World.
While the world watches Ukraine, another front is quietly emerging. Moldova's prime minister is sounding the alarm, saying that Russia is plotting to deploy 10,000 troops to Transnistria and install a pro-Kremlin government in Chisinau. It's not just about Moldova, it's about NATO's doorstep, EU's expansion, and future of democracy in Eastern Europe. Marek Steele has more.
Could Russia possibly reinforce its peacekeeping force stationed in Transnistria? According to the Moldovan Prime Minister, yes. In an interview with the Financial Times, Minister Recean said that Russia could deploy as many as 10,000 troops to the breakaway province if the pro-Russian opposition wins an upcoming election.
You can imagine with 10,000 troops what the leverage and pressure would be on the southwestern part of Ukraine, he said, but also close to Romania, which is a NATO member state.
Transnistria, a predominantly Russian-speaking separatist region, broke away from Moldova after a brief conflict in the early 1990s. The province is home to a depleted Russian peacekeeping force of up to 1,500 men, and Chisinau has repeatedly called for their withdrawal. With the region landlocked between Ukraine and a pro-Western government in Moldova, Russia is currently unable to send more troops there.
Russia has always tried, once they've created this frozen conflict, like Transnistria is one of them, to instrumentalize it and use it as a weapon, as a foreign policy weapon whenever they need it. This is textbook Russians' manuals.
Moldova's government, which aims to lead the country into the European Union by 2030, has repeatedly accused Russia of trying to destabilize the nation.
We have overcome unseen challenges, from foreign interference meant to create a humanitarian crisis to constant attempts to destabilize our country.
The country's pro-EU president, Maia Sandu, was re-elected in November, defeating a candidate backed by the traditionally pro-Russian Socialist Party. The vote, held along an EU referendum, was marred by allegations of heavy Russian meddling.
It's a geopolitical battle between the pro-Russian forces and the pro-European Union forces, right? And the margins are so tight. Again, the EU referendum that now is enshrined in the constitution was won with a difference of 0.7%. Right. With Maia Sandu won the elections in Moldova due to the diaspora's vote, because nationally she would have lost.
Today, the small country of 2.5 million is still battling an uneven fight with Russia. Maia Sandu has become a target in Russia's latest campaign.
A Kremlin-backed bot network launched a coordinated disinformation campaign targeting Moldovan President Maia Sandu, falsely claiming her imminent end and circulating fake images depicting her execution.
Moldova is headed for a parliamentary election this September, and not only those currently in power in Chisinau expect more Russian meddling.
Moldova's upcoming parliamentary elections will be a prime target of Moscow's hybrid war. Russia is likely to use a web of cash, content and coercion to try to tilt the vote.
For TVP World, I'm Marek Steele.
The political situation in the Czech Republic remains unpredictable, as Justice Minister Pavel Blažek recently resigned over a scandal involving a massive Bitcoin donation to the Ministry of Justice by a known criminal and drug dealer. The scandal could influence the upcoming elections, with the far-right populist ANO party led by Andrej Babiš looking to gain the most. Diana Skaya has the details in this next report.
A Bitcoin scandal is rocking the Czech government to its core. The country's now former justice minister, Pavel Blažek, denying any illegal activity, stepped down on Friday after accepting a $45 million Bitcoin donation from Tomasz Jirikovski, a convicted drug trafficker and former head of Nucleus, a dark web marketplace known for trading illicit drugs and weapons. Meanwhile, the populist ANO party is accusing Blažek of laundering money for the drug dealer. The party's top brass now say they plan on calling a parliamentary no-confidence vote on the government. And amid the mounting pressure, the outgoing Minister of Justice briefly appeared at an extraordinary parliamentary session, admitting his mistake, but refusing to comment on the matter any further. Initially, the government tried justifying the decision by claiming the funds would be used for public projects, such as the refurbishment of a prison. However, on Wednesday, Czech Prime Minister Petr Fiala attempted to shift the blame and sprung on the opposition ANO and Freedom and Direct Democracy parties, accusing them of dirty politics ahead of the upcoming general election.
I am also calling the National Security Council because the Ministry of Justice may have been the target or victim of fraud. My questions to the National Security Council will be focused on whether any state agencies knew about this or had information.
With general elections to be held in October, the government is facing intense pressure. The opposition continues to call for the government's resignation, while the ruling coalition, headed by the Civic Democrats, scrambles to distance itself from the scandal. Diana Skaya for TVP World.
Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke on the phone with U.S. President Donald Trump on Thursday. The two leaders invited each other to their respective capitals for face-to-face meetings. But before that happens, their teams will discuss a trade agreement between the two countries. Trump and Xi mainly discussed issues connected to trade, avoiding contentious subjects like Iran or Russia. Last week, Trump accused China of violating the terms of their trade agreement that was signed in Geneva in May. Under that deal, both countries agreed to temporarily reduce tariffs. The U.S. lowered duties on Chinese goods from 145% to 30%, while China cut tariffs on American products from 125% to 10%. After the phone call, President Trump said the upcoming trade deal is, quote, in good shape. The Chinese embassy in Washington made sure to underline that it was President Trump who initiated the phone call. The bout between two tennis heavy hitters, Poland's Iga Świątek and Belarus's Aryna Sabalenka, ended with the latter winning 2-1, while the first two sets gave spectators a fierce back and forth. The last set of the match saw the Belarusian steamroll Poland's tennis superstar. Now Sabalenka awaits her upcoming championship match against American Coco Gauff. Franciszek Pilis has more.
With this latest loss, Iga Świątek's 26-match-long win streak at the French Open has been broken. At the same time, Poland's defending champion will no longer get a shot at winning her 5th Roland Garros trophy. Despite losing the match, Świątek went down as the first player to take a set off the Belarusian during this year's French Open. The loss also means that Świątek has fallen further down the WTA rankings, currently in the 7th spot. Aryna Sabalenka, the current WTA #1 ranked female tennis player in the world, dethroned Świątek from the top spot in October 2024 after the latter spent 125 weeks in the position, underlining the rivalry between the two top-of-the-line players. Now, the Belarusian gears up for the last match of the contest and her first shot at a Roland Garros title, scheduled for Saturday, June 7th. Franciszek Pilis, TVP World.
As Chancellor Friedrich Merz shakes hands with Donald Trump in the Oval Office, 10,000 kilometers away in Brussels, NATO defense ministers are preparing to rewrite the rules of European security, with Moldova also warning of a possible Russian troop surge in Transnistria, and the U.S. pushing for a historic 5% NATO defense spending target. The stakes have never been higher. Now joining us to discuss these developments is Gerlinda Nihus, former Deputy Director of Defense and Security Cooperation at NATO. Hello, good evening, and thank you for joining us on World News Tonight.
Good evening. Hello.
Yes, now German Chancellor Friedrich Merz traveling to have his first sit-down with Donald Trump. We don't know all the details, but there are several, and I think I'm most curious about this proposition that's been floating around that Germany may take more of the burden for supporting Ukraine, but it would need to buy American weapons to do so. Do we have any information on that, or are there any headroads concerning that?
Well, I mean, I have not been privy to those meetings, but that Germany has already indicated that they are supporting the increase in defense spending to 5%, so 3.5 of that in core defense spending and 1.5 to broader security and defense-related matters such as infrastructure, cyber, etc. So that has already been confirmed by Merz, but also by other ministers of the government. Now, where the money will go, I guess that's part of the negotiation to follow.
And tell me, concerning the U.S. reaction to that, I know that Germany, to get to 2%, actually included some infrastructure projects, such as roads, in that figure last year. Is this acceptable for the United States, that this 3.5% plus the 1.5% in infrastructure or things to assist the military?
It seems so that this is acceptable, because it's also Hexet and others who refer to this 5% and with this combination. So, and in a way, I think it's also logical that if you want to have efficient security and defense, or deterrence and defense. I mean, you also need to have roads which are broad enough for tanks to go through, or bridges which are strong enough to allow a tank to cover. Or you need to have an infrastructure which is secure against cyber attacks. So in many ways, I think this 1.5 on defense, on security-related investments, is a logical addition to the core defense spending of 3.5%.
Certainly. Now we've seen Donald Trump signal that he wants to have some rapprochement with Russia. He wants to potentially go back to business as usual. Yet Friedrich Merz in Washington said that Nord Stream 2 pipeline was a mistake. And earlier declarations were made that that pipeline will never become functional. I'm wondering how the United States may react to that, especially in light of Trump actually supporting that, he was always in favor of Nord Stream 2 never coming online.
Well, I think on a broader scale, if I may say so, I think what we are seeing is the transatlantic security bond as we have been seeing it over the 70 years unraveling. In many ways, Pax Americana and the US-led global order are really vanishing. I mean, Trump is very close to Putin. He is infringing on NATO principles and agreed policies. He's coercing NATO allies, Canada and Denmark. He did not ambush today Merz, so he was lucky, but he did ambush some time ago President Zelensky. So all of this clearly means for Europeans we must change gear and focus on what is needed to become a serious geostrategic actor ourselves and believe in our own strengths, which is also a point I think both your Prime Minister and my Chancellor made some time ago. So I think we are really witnessing a shift of a generation here. And this is not only about Nord Stream 2 or opening or not, it's about geopolitics at a larger scale.
Yes, I hear that a lot lately. And if indeed the world order is shifting, do you believe that it is more of a multipolar world, that instead of this U.S. hegemon, first of all, and second of all, what will Europe's role be in this new world?
Well, this is certainly what this multipolar world, which is certainly what Russia and China are aiming for. I mean, if you look at the recent joint declaration they signed in Moscow on the occasion of the Victory Day, this is all about this multipolar world. It's for Europe to make up its mind whether it wants to be a playball of these strongmen in Washington, in Moscow and Beijing, or whether it wants to really also grow up and become a geostrategic actor in its own right. And for that, of course, it needs to invest in its defense and security. So that's why the 5% really makes sense. You know, they are not only linked to this capability targets, which were also approved at NATO today, but they are instrumental. They are key for Europe really to live up to its own vision of what the world should be.
Certainly, and judging by the ministerial that took place at NATO headquarters today, would you say that Europe is awake right now and is aware of the challenges that it faces? We heard the NATO Secretary General say that, the problem isn't necessarily right now, but in 3 to 5 years, if we don't do something now, if we don't act right now, we could have a serious major problem.
Yeah. I would share that view. I mean, if you look at the Ukraine discussion, which the meeting of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which was co-chaired by the UK and Germany, very tellingly, the US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was absent. But in many ways, I think this meeting gave one overarching message. I mean, this coalition stands, and it stands by Ukraine, and it also communicates that Europeans and Canada, for now, know that this responsibility will largely fall on their own shoulders. Yeah. So I think that's what we are seeing. On the EU side, I think there are a number of very useful processes underway to the EU with more instruments in the realm of security and defense. And NATO has to do something similar and hope that a US withdrawal, which cannot be ruled out by no means, will not happen overnight.
Mm-hmm. Well, while Europe may have its challenges ahead in the future, if we look just to the east, in Moldova, it looks like they don't have very much time. They have elections coming up in September. We saw heavy Russian interference, a lot of Russian money. In fact, 1% of Moldovan GDP go towards influencing the elections the last time around when there was the referendum to join the EU and Maia Sandu's re-election. What does the European Union do this time around, especially when we hear of intelligence reports that 10,000 Russian soldiers could be added to Transnistria in the event that a political takeover is successful?
Well, I think that both the EU and also NATO in different manners have increased their support to Moldova over past years significantly. And clearly for the EU, this is now mainly to help Moldova join the EU, and not have the process derailed thanks to Russian meddling, which is unfortunately, on all times high in Moldova. So I think we need to take the threat which Russia poses to Moldova as serious as we should take the threat Russia poses to all of us.
Certainly. Is there anything in specific that Europeans can do to help thwart these plans or make the current government in Chisinau more successful in preventing these Russian influence operations?
Yeah, I think both NATO and the EU, they are helping in all reform processes. Yeah, they are helping to curtail corruption. They are helping for the EU side to have Moldovans adapting to the EU acquis, which is what is required. On the NATO side, the focus is on supporting the reform and modernization of the defense and security sector with less financial means than the EU, who has been investing heavily in Moldovan reform. So I think together, but with the EU in the lead, there is a lot being done to help Moldova forge the future it wants for itself and its people.
I'd like to kind of relate now to Ukraine. German Chancellor Merz, together with President Zelensky, last time those two were together, talked about the range, the restrictions on long-range weapons being undone by European countries that have provided weapons to Ukraine, and even the United States. Maybe you could, maybe you have an idea of why exactly he did that, made that statement at the time, and are there any plans for Germany to provide either the Taurus or other components that will allow Ukraine to develop long-range weapons?
Well, you would have to ask that to Friedrich Merz himself, but I think what is certainly in the making, or it has been committed, is a significant aid package to Ukraine from the German side to up to 5 billion euros, which includes also long-range weapons to be produced together with Ukraine in Ukraine. So there is emphasis on the production in Ukraine. The government has decided to stop communicating about the Taurus issue, or whether or not it's been delivered. I hope they do this because I think it would be useful, but this is my personal opinion.
Eventually find out one day whether those missiles have arrived or not. Gerlinde Niehaus, former Deputy Director of the Defense and Security Cooperation at NATO, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Good evening.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.